A get-home gun. The get-home gun concept. You're at work. Something big happens. The peanut butter and chocolate hits the fan, the balloon goes up, and you have to make it home. For whatever reason, you can't bring your vehicle. Your vehicle is stuck where it is. You grab your get-home gun, whatever that is, whatever you picture that being for you. We're going to discuss some of those options today. The get-home gun concept. I've been thinking about this. So that's what we're going to discuss. If that interests you, stay tuned to this episode of Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting tactics, different survival concepts. The right way, with Almighty God at the center. Biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world firsthand experience. First and foremost, I'm a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. After that, all the other stuff comes secondary. Bullet points in the show notes. Military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, and a bunch of other stuff in there. Let's talk about the get-home gun concept. Now, I hope that you, as a man in America, with a shall not be infringed kind of attitude, carries a full-size fighting handgun day to day. But even if you don't carry a full-size fighting handgun, a combat handgun on your person, hopefully you carry something on your person. That scenario that I laid out, that's assuming you can get to your vehicle. What if you can't get anywhere? What if you have to leave right from where you are? You can't even get to your vehicle. Your vehicle has been firebombed. Your vehicle's been Molotov cocktailed, whatever. Hopefully you have a good, robust EDC, although this is not the episode for that. We're talking about a get-home gun that would be in addition to your EDC. And this is going to really depend. I tried to do some research before this episode, and I try and stay away from the AI stuff, the search engines. I think that stuff's evil. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I don't think you should use it. I don't think it's like any other tool. I don't think it's like the internet or a hammer or a firearm. I think it's evil. I think that you parsing out your intellect and your research ability and your reasoning to something else thinking for you is bad. So I stayed away from that. But the research that I could do, that's a rabbit hole we probably shouldn't get into. But the research I did said something like an average of a 25-minute commute, and the only mileage I could get was around 20 miles. That's an average. You could drive far more than that. You could walk to work in a mile or two, in which case probably just run home with whatever you have on you. Right? But that's vastly different, right? Do you live in little Somalia under a Muslim banner, a.k.a. Minnesota? Have you seen their flag? Blech. Anyway, Muslims want to kill you, cut your head off, and take your women. That's what they do. Read the Quran. I don't apologize for that. But if you live there, right, and things get rowdy, they decide they're actually going to hold people accountable for committing crime, massive fraud, and they start rounding people up, and it turns into a little Mogadishu, and they start looting, rioting, firebombing, cutting your heads off. Your get-home gun might be far different than somebody that commutes from Genesee to Lewiston, Idaho, even though the distances might be the same. If the new Democratic Socialist mayor of New York City decides he's going to actually practice collectivism and all the women are now community property, which is a thing that traditionally has been done in those socialist regimes, and there's some mass uprising, let's just say if you're in New York, you're in the wrong place. But assuming you can have a gun, which you can have a gun, assuming you do have a gun, that's a far different choice, because you being seen with a gun might be a far bigger issue than you actually Well, let's just say it's a non-permissive environment. That all to say, it's wildly different depending on you and where you live. First thing I'm going to say about the get-home gun, you're probably familiar with the get-home bag, the get-home bag concept. Well, what I've seen and what I think is far more common is people have way too much stuff. Firepower versus mobility. This is a real equation. I don't care how big and bad and strong you are. The more stuff you have on you, the slower you are. Period. Right? Sprinters in the Olympics don't wear body armor. Case settled. Right? The more stuff you have on you, the slower you are. And there's a trade-off there. But a lot of people have way too much stuff in their bags. If you'd have a hard time walking that route on a normal afternoon or a normal day, if you can't go that average of 20 miles, you probably want to add almost no stuff. But assuming you're in decent shape and it's not going to kill you to go 20 miles in a stretch, just beware of that firepower versus mobility equation. Going back to that, carry a full-size fighting handgun. A lot of people don't. They carry a little Ruger LCP, and I like Ruger, but Ruger LCP is not a fighting handgun. All right, if you carry a little Ruger LCP, a little hashtag #MeToo380, or you carry a Derringer or something, right, then you might want to move up to a full-size fighting handgun, a Beretta 92. If you're going to slum it, a Glock 17. And some kind of small carry bag or something you can have right in front of you on your chest that looks like a regular sling bag or maybe you want to have a complete different EDC setup that you would just want to throw on in this case, because you're not going to give up a lot in mobility carrying a full-size handgun. It's not like they weigh a ton. It's going to give you a lot more firepower than that little baby 380. A handgun is not the best thing to have, but if your city is burning to the ground, because a lot of people commute from the country to the city. Otherwise, I don't know why you would go to a city. Some people actually live in cities voluntarily, but you get the point. Most people go from not the city into the city. So you're probably trying to get out of the city. If your city is burning down, little Mogadishu style, people yelling Allah Akbar, blowing themselves up and cutting people's heads off, you probably don't want a handgun. But if you had to pick a handgun, it's probably a lot better than a LCP 380 or your Smith & Wesson J-frame stub-nose 38 with 5 rounds, right? So, a 6-hour Legion, single action only with an RMR on it, is a lot better option than an LCP. Despite what you may think, if you love revolvers, it's a lot better option than a Smith & Wesson K-frame in that scenario. That being said, that's more of a battlefield scenario. That's more of an urban warfare scenario. I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps after my combat tours. Guess what rules urban warfare today? AR-15s and AK-47s. Now, an AK-47 is seen in America as a bad guy gun. So you may not want to be seen with one of those. They may mistake you for Antifa or whoever, right? That's just, you can get mad at that. And I like the AK. It's a good platform. I used one in the sandbox. There were times when I picked up an AK and used it. It's a phenomenal weapon for what it is. It's got a lot of merits, but it's also seen in America as the bad guy gun. The other option is the AR-15. This is kind of the standard, right? So in that kind of scenario, a little Mogadishu scenario, AR-15 is a pretty compelling option. They're not heavy. One of the reasons the military went to them, right? You get a high power-to-weight ratio. And you can decide if you want to go AR pistol, laughing air quotes, pistol, like a braced 11.5, 12-inch barrel. That's a pretty high power-to-weight ratio mobility equation there. You wanted to go 300 blackout. It's not my favorite caliber, but for this, it'd be okay. But just your standard M4 with a bailout bag, 16-inch, decent, reliable AR. Take your pick. You want an LPVO, you want a red dot, whatever. Let's not get in the weeds. With several magazines, that's one of the great things about the AR-15, right? The ammunition and the magazines are light. Hopefully you don't need it. That's a scenario where you might want to be seen with a long gun because you're a lot harder of a target. So if they're just going around, because they're cowards, killing unarmed civilians, well, now you're an armed civilian. So that alone may be enough to just get you out of the city. But if you do need the ammo, it's lightweight, and it's not the most powerful round. It's an intermediate rifle round, but it's got high power to weight ratio. So that's a good option. And that's probably for a lot of people that go into a city. AR-15 is not a bad option for this. You might not think about it like this, but pretty much every AR-15 is a takedown gun. It's got 2 pins. You can take the 2 pins out. If you want to be super high speed, you take an old sock, not cotton. Why are you wearing cotton socks? Stop with the cotton socks. But a good polyester or nylon sock or something like that. Something that you'd actually wear for like being athletic or rucking. A lot of times, if you have socks, I don't know if you're like me, but you probably lose one and you have an odd one. You can do a super high-speed method like put a clean sock on the end with the bolt carrier group to keep it all in there and keep dirt out of it. Then you just pull it off, throw the pins in, and now it's fully assembled. There's a lot more expensive options to make your AR-15 a takedown, but that pretty much will do it. And once you take it down, you could probably fit it in a pack. So you'd have either option. You just put it together and you've got a full hard target option. Or if you want to put it in your pack, if you have to go through a non-permissive environment, roadblocks, whatever, and then assemble it, but you have that option, right? You can make it smaller. So there is that. Okay, another option, pretty much they're all takedown guns. You might not think of them that way, but shotguns. Pretty much every semi-auto and pump-action shotgun is going to be a takedown, and it's going to be a one, usually easy, no tools required, hand turn, take the cap on the mag tube off, and now that shotgun comes apart, comes in 2 big pieces, which will also go in a backpack. So those are also takedown guns. And you know about what I think about the shotgun for an all-around survival tool. You give up some range over the AR-15, and the ammunition's heavier, but you get a lot of up-close personal knockdown ability potential. You got shotgun, you got slugs, you got buckshot. You also have things like breaching rounds, which in an urban environment could come in handy. And if part of your commute is in a more rural area, you've got some options there too. But the shotgun's very versatile. I've talked about that ad nausea. So it's also a good option, also a takedown option. Also, really good power to weight ratio. If you think of the projectiles you get, if you look at it like round per round, yeah, shotgun rounds are pretty heavy. But if you look at it projectile-wise, right, a 3-inch Magnum number 4 buck has 41 pellets per shell. And that's 41 pellets of buckshot. I'm not talking about number 4 birdshot. I'm talking about number 4 buckshot. That's 41 pellets per round. You have a pretty vanilla tactical shotgun, that's 7 rounds times 41. That's a lot of projectiles. So if you look at it that way, it's not so bad. It's not what I would take in Minneapolis, but, in somewhere where that's probably not the case, where you're probably not having mass mobs of Muslim invaders, it might be a decent option. Let's talk about another one I'm usually not hip on, but the PDW / personal defense weapon concept. High power to weight ratio, right? A small PCC, not like a full-size PCC, not like a 16-inch AR that fires 9mm that's just as heavy as an AR, but a small one of these. Something like your braced pistol concept, or like turns a Glock into a personal defense weapon, or, the SIG 320 platform into a personal defense weapon, like the Flux Raider, those kind of things. Those would be good here, especially if you're not real good with a pistol. And pistol is a hard gun to master. I'm not talking about you went to an indoor range and you could hit a giant silhouette target at 5 yards. I'm talking about if you need to get hits at 25, 50 yards, 100 meters, which even a not great pistol shooter could do with one of these brace pistols with an optic. It's a lot more like shooting a carbine than shooting a handgun at those distances. Now, it's still 9mm. 9mm is a good balance in handgun shootability versus firepower. It's not anywhere near even an intermediate rifle round. So you're giving up a lot in firepower, but it's a small, tiny package. And if you went to like a dedicated, what traditionally would be a submachine gun, but you're going to have a semi-auto version of that, like the MP5 or the Springfield Cuna, assuming it's a decent gun. Something like that, that's easily you put in a bag. And if you're a yuppie, and I don't mean that disparagingly, like a young urban professional yuppie, right, and you carry a laptop bag or something, well, one of those will fit into a laptop bag. You get on pretty much anywhere with that and walk around with it, and you just look like a yuppie with a laptop bag. A yuppie, that's a hard sentence to say. You look like a yuppie with a laptop bag, which is in fact what you are. So if you want to be a soft target, you want to be a hard target, you take it out of the bag, right? So there's something to be said for those. Generally, they're not my favorite, but for this, for like urban to suburban, high mobility, small platform, but still a lot more shootable than a handgun, there is that. And I think it's way overplayed and like more of a romantic idea than a practical idea, but it could take the same magazines as your primary carry gun. Same caliber. So you get the idea there. That's something. Now, if you're mostly rural, like you don't commute into a city, but you still commute, and most of your stuff is rural, and or you have a very, very long get-home route, like whatever, the classic prepper, EMP, or the city is just mass chaos and everything's stuck in gridlock. You waited 30 seconds too late to bug out of the city. You didn't want to get fired, so you waited an extra 10, 15 minutes till you were sure, and now you try to get on the freeway and you're stuck. There's 100 cars behind you, thousands of cars in front of you. You're not moving. That car is not moving ever. It's going to rot there. And you have to walk a long way, a lot longer than the average 20 miles. Well, this is where a 22 could really come in handy. Not so much the weight of the 22. They're fairly light, right? Ruger 1022 is fairly light, handy carbine. But because the ammo is so light, and if you have to go hundreds of miles, potentially on foot, this is one of the places where the 22 shines, right? You could carry 7 standard combat loadout in an AR-15. It's going to be fairly heavy, but 7 mags is not unmanageable. A shotgun, maybe 100 rounds, which is still a lot of ammo, but not if you're going hundreds of miles and you don't know how long it's going to take you. You don't know what kind of weird side quest you're going to get off on. Well, the 22, you could carry thousands of rounds. Let's stick with 1,000 because that's probably more than you're going to need. That's 2 bricks. That's really nothing. You could put that in cargo pockets, right? So if you're going to have to bug home a lot farther than your traditional 20 miles, whatever the average is, 20 miles, 25 miles. If you're going hundreds of miles, like you commute a long distance and you go home on the weekends, or you just drive, an hour each way every day on the freeway, that's a long distance. So something like that power to weight ratio, especially on the ammo, and if most of that is rural, like you're not stuck in a big city, but even the freeway might be blocked and you have to go a long way in a fairly rural area, the hinterlands of cities, or just straight up country, then the 22 has a lot of merit. Obviously, the 22, not great for defense, but it can be done. It's certainly deadly. And obviously, it's good for, let's say, survival hunting. It's a great small game thing, which if you're on the move, Oscar Mike, that's probably more feasible, a lot more opportunity, and you're limited to what you can carry anyway. Right, your goal here is not making a base camp and hanging up an elk and singing Kumbaya by a campfire with a guitar or whatever prepper fantasies there are. Your goal is to get home. So the grouse that you shot that you can, eat quickly and or take what you don't eat with you, carry it till you're going to stop for the night anyway, and you just get an opportunity at a grouse or, fill in protein source here. 22 is great for that. So if you're going a long distance on foot, or potentially, the 22 is a great option, something like a Ruger 1022 takedown. And there are many others, right? There's the AR-7 if you get one that's reliable and you test it with your ammo. They don't hold up the best to thousands and thousands of rounds of shooting, but that's not what we're talking about. If you're talking about the balloon goes up and you're stuck where you are and you're never going to make it home because it's so far, that's a different scenario than what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about you're far from home, but your best option is to try and get home quickly. Not to stay where you are and set up a post-apocalyptic LLC trading post, but to actually get home. So those are some thoughts on get-home guns. I could do a lot more on this concept if it is interesting to you guys. So reach out and let me know. I'm not going to insult you. You probably know how to do that, especially if you're a patron. But the get-home gun. You probably, if you're into preparedness, survival, you probably have a get-home bag. Hopefully in your vehicle. But what's your get-home gun? Anyway, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do. Your tactical verse of the day. Revelation 18. New King James. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.